Hi, it's Melinda Kucsera, and we were supposed to record another episode of Fantasy Lore and More tonight, but the author didn't show up, and I hope that she's okay and that it was just, didn't see I hope it was just that she didn't see the email or something came up or something, and I hope that she is fine. But since we don't have another episode of Fantasy Lore and More tonight, and we don't have I'm saying tonight, even though you could be listening to this in the middle of the morning. But for me, it's tonight. Today is January the 19th, and I'm recording this at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Not that that matters to you, but I thought I would mention that. So any references I make to the time of day make a little bit of sense. So yeah, so we were supposed to record an episode of Fantasy Lore and More. I'm not going to tell you who the author was supposed to be or what book we were going to be discussing, because I hope that they'll come back and that we'll get another opportunity to record that episode. So if you are that author, don't worry. I'm not mad. It's totally fine. Just, hit me up so that we can get you rescheduled. And for everybody else, Rand has asked that I narrate our newsletters again. He's really liking this. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. So if you listen to the January 1st episode, which was the New Year's episode, Rand and the other characters are supposed to review me. They're going to review their scribe. But at the end of the email, he forgot to give you his star rating. And that's where we pick up in our January 8th newsletter. So I'm going to narrate it to you, and we're going to hope that this one is not as awkward as the last one, because I'm going to try and read in the character voice, but I may not succeed. But you'll see. Let me just pull that up. Okay, so the email that went out on January 8th, the subject line was, "Guess who forgot the stars?" And spoiler alert, that was Rand. I don't think anybody has any surprise on that. So here we go. Hey, last week I reviewed my scribe. Actually, for this podcast, it's not last week. It was the January 1st, New Year's Day episode. But I forgot to give you my final rating. This is Rand Sarn's son from the Cursebreaker series. And there's links below. You can get Cursebreaker Enchanted for free, ebook or audiobook. If you want a print book, we can't give you that for free, unfortunately, because printing and mailing costs money. But I'm also in the Rogue Gods trilogy. Okay, I'll admit it. I didn't finish my review on purpose. In my defense, I'm fictional, and I only exist when you read my books. But my story only progresses when Melinda, that's me, the scribe that he complains about, anyways, back to the newsletter, writes more stories about me. So I need to stay on her good side. That's right, Rand. You need to stay on my good side, and you're not at the moment. But I promised you a review, and she promised to write more Cursebreaker books, so this is so hard. No, Rand, it's not. Give me 5 stars. I'm a hardworking author with a full-time job and a commute, and I write books for you. I've written lots of books for you. I have a spreadsheet with how many words you have gotten, so you can give me 5 stars. It's okay. All right. My aside, let's get back to what Rand has to say. I'll give Melinda 4 stars since I got page time, but I have to deduct a star because in most of the scenes starring me that you'll see this year, I'm either a baby or the same age as my dad. He ages up or down accordingly, so the age gap between us is maintained, and the same is true of my uncle. And he's wrong. You will actually see him as the kid in the Cursebreaker series, because I'd like to get out 2 more Cursebreaker books this year, but that all depends on Sarn behaving and following the outline and following directions and doing what he needs to do. So we will see as the year progresses if that actually happens. But if it doesn't, it's on them, not on me. I'm just the author. Back to the newsletter. How can I be a baby or an adult in the books you'll see this year? Well, that's where things get interesting. Pull up a chair and I'll tell you. Last week, I revealed the 5 books that are charging towards you in 2024. One of them is Rogue Rescue, which is book 4 of the Robin of Larkspur series. And this is Melinda again, jumping in. I'm actually like a couple of chapters from the end. I'm really trying to end that in the next week or 2. Editing it's going to be a massive project, but I will persevere. Anyways, back to the newsletter. In that book, I'm a baby, and I can only say hi That's really why I took away 1 star. I finally get rescued as the title implies. When did I go missing? That happened in Hunter's Night, book 1 of the Robin of Larkspur series, and it's set about 4.5 years before Cursebreaker Enchanted, or as we characters like to say, 4.5 years BCBE. So that explains why you'll see me as a 9-month-old toddler this year. How can you see me as a 21-year-old adult? Well, part of the Rogue Gods trilogy takes place in the future when I'm a fun-loving 21-year-old mage in my own right. And I have magic. I use it too, but I might poke fun at it and other things, but not in a disrespectful way or anything. I'm still as amusing as I was when I was a kid, but my sense of humor grew along with me, so I might not take all the magical craziness as seriously as other characters in the book. In my defense, I grew up with a powerful mage as a father, and he can't stay out of trouble even though he tried really hard to avoid it. Although, if you've read the Cursebreaker books, did he really try all that hard to avoid it? Curious authors want to know. So I might not have the same sense of danger as other characters who didn't grow up chasing monsters and dragons and enchanted trees. I might be an adult-sized version of my kid self, but I digress. Why am I suddenly all grown up in those books? That's where things get interesting and a bit spoilery. So the next part of this email is rated S for spoilers. But you're going to read it anyway. Actually, you're listening to it because I'm reading it. Anyways, sorry. Because you want to know what happened. In Hunter's Night, and again is book 1 of not the Rogue Gods, Robin of Larkspur series, the Wild Hunt kidnapped me and Rosalie, she's Robin's daughter. In the sequel, her mom and my dad figured out what happened to us and joined forces. It's not their fault it took a whole book for that. In Hunter's Night, they had other people to save because there was a lot of other things happening. Since those other things don't involve me, I'll let you read about them in the book. Oh, how nice of you, Red. Onward to more spoilers. But they feature me, so I can spill them in this email. That's the rule. In Rogue Ranger, which is book 3 of the Robin of Larkspur series, Papa found me despite a lot of opposition from allies and enemies, but he got caught up in the same spell I was caught in. See what I mean? He can't stay out of trouble even when he's trying to save me. Why did the Wild Hunt kidnap me and Rosalie? Since that's revealed in Hunter's Night, I can tell you. They have a summoning spell, and for some reason they needed the son of a mage, me, and the daughter of a witch, Rosalie. What does the spell summon? That's a spoiler, since you find out in Rogue Rescue, book 4 of the Robin of Larkspur series, and that book is coming this year. Well, I hope it's coming this year. It was supposed to end a few chapters ago, but the characters keep finding loose ends we didn't tie up, so I have to keep giving them scenes. But there was some really good fight scene and a chase scene that I hadn't expected because of that. So I think you'll really like those extra. They're not extra. I think they really add something to the story. Again, that's me. That's Melinda. That's my opinion, not the opinion of the characters. And let's get back to the newsletter. I can tell you no child was hurt by this spell because it was interrupted pretty spectacularly. But you'll have to read about that in Rogue Rescue to find out who interrupted it. Or you can read the second half of Summon the Gods, book 2 of the Rogue Gods trilogy to find out, since characters from the past, Robin, my dad, me as a baby, collide with the characters from the future, adult Rosalie, and someone else. Why doesn't my adult self go back 20 years to that summoning? Because I don't do time travel. It's just too weird, and I can't wrap my mind around that. But don't worry. I had a better reason in the book for not going on that adventure. Demons attack Mount Eredrin in book 1 of the Rogue Gods trilogy, Gateway to Hell. Papa raised me to take care of my fellow humans, so I must save my neighbors, and that means sending Rosalie and her time mage friend back to the summoning. Somehow the summoning back then and the demon invasion are related. But I've got people to save right in front of me, so I wish them good luck and send them on their way. I don't want to meet myself as a baby anyway. That's a little too weird even for me. And what would I say to Papa back then? Hi, I'm your son from the future. I don't think that would go over well. No, Rosalie can have fun with that. I'll stay home and deal with the demon invasion. It sounds like a lot more fun than dealing with all that time travel stuff. I should also tell you that The Rogue Gods trilogy takes place partially on an alternate timeline, and that's why I haven't mentioned Papa. Somehow, he ended up on another timeline where there's no demon invasion, and he's not around much. That leaves me as Mount Eredrin's mage and protector. Its defense is in my hands, and I don't want to disappoint him. So I can't fail the people of Mount Eredrin. The Rogue Gods books are multi-point of view, and this is just one of the plot lines. I won't spoil the other one. Or maybe I will in a future email. I might forget I said I wouldn't tell you what else happens. Find out next week if I do. And don't forget to follow the Rogue Gods Kickstarter to get notified and get your copy of the trilogy before anyone else. And that I'll have the link for that down in the description or the show notes, depending on where you're listening. You can read the entire first book of the Rogue Gods trilogy and most of the second one because I'm still finishing it. There was one specific thing they needed to do, and the characters are taking their sweet time to do it because they want more scenes, but they're doing really cool stuff to put it off. So like, I'm kind of torn. I should be forcing them to do the one thing that we need to do, close the book. But I guess as long as it's cool stuff and it's, it's good action, it's good tension, it's good like character development, I can't really complain and I can't really make them. Anyways, this is Melinda and I am going to stop. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to give away too much because I haven't finished the second book and I haven't written the third book. And there's things I think they'll do and there's things I want them to do. But until the whole thing is done and they've actually done it, like I don't want to say too much in case they decide to take the books in a different direction because they've already done that to me several times. So I'm very glad I haven't said a lot publicly about this trilogy because I would have had to retcon it and I don't like doing that. So, all right. So that was the January 8th newsletter. Let's go to the one that went out on January 15th. And that subject line was Marvel at the Crystals. Hey, last week I talked about the Rogue Gods trilogy, and I told you that I'm an adult in it, and it takes place in an alternate timeline. I hope it stays that way so the events there don't interfere with my story plans. This is Rand, Sarn's son from the Cursebreaker series, and I have big plans for us. I'll tell you about them as soon as the Rogue Gods trilogy is in your hands. Why wait? Because then my scribe, Melinda Kucsera, will have to go along with my plan. If you flash back with me to the writing schedule I mentioned in our New Year's Day newsletter, which is the Happy New Year's podcast episode, then you saw other books than mine on the schedule. But that must be an oversight. So I'm putting together a plan to fix that. Since 2024 is an election year, you'll need lots of time with me and my papa to get through the end of it. So I'll be back here plotting and scheming to make sure you get it. But I digressed, and now I need to swing back to the Rogue Gods trilogy. I might be using the next few newsletters to apply for a change from fun, magical side character to main character status in book 3. Melinda might have sidelined me in book 2 because a certain character, Rosalie, promised to do one very important thing in book 2 of the Rogue Gods trilogy. If you're one of our awesome subscribers to Patreon or Ream, then you know what that something is. And if you want to join, you totally can. And then you can read all of the whips that I'm currently writing, which there is 4 of them on there, and be way ahead of everyone else. Because realistically, the Rogue Gods trilogy Kickstarter probably won't happen until March. So other people won't get their hands on it till April, maybe, depending on how the writing of book 3 goes. And it won't be on retailers for another 3 to 6 months. So yeah, that's your best bet for reading it. If you're not subscribed to us on Ream or Patreon, then what are you waiting for? Come join us. Read our books months before anyone else. And the links will be in the description or the show notes. Okay, back to Rogue Gods for real this time. So the trilogy takes place partly in an alternate timeline. Keep that in mind when reading it, since it references events that did not and will not happen on the actual timeline that flows through all our books, because I won't let them. Did you know that the trilogy wasn't supposed to veer off into an alternate version of our world? Villains don't follow instructions all that well, so that's how we ended up there. And that's true. Villains really they don't follow outlines. They don't listen to me. I have no control over them as an author. And it's kind of fun and also kind of frustrating. What's that twist? Well, Summon the Gods, the second book in the Rogue Gods trilogy, introduced something like the Emkron crystal from the Marvel comic books. And I might be mispronouncing that because I'm just going by how they pronounced it in the X-Men animated series that I watched when I was a kid. And I loved that show. It was like the best Saturday morning cartoon ever. Of course, they went full on dystopia with the Age of Apocalypse storyline, where the mutant named Apocalypse ruled, and everyone who survived his takeover had a really bad time. Like a really bad time. Fun fact, did you know that storyline published the same year my Scribe started reading Marvel Comics back in the 1990s? I'm actually not sure about that. When I did start buying comic books as like a preteen, that was the first comic books that I got was the Age of Apocalypse ones, but I don't know if it had actually finished before I started buying them or if I started buying them in the middle of it. I don't know the answer to that. Because at the time, I didn't really know what was going on. Like the only thing I knew about the Marvel comics was I loved the TV show and I wanted to read more about the X-Men. Like Storm was my favorite character from the X-Men, and I just really wanted more of her. I like some of the other ones too, but I was a really big Storm fan. So I'm not sure exactly how the publication went. I could probably Google it and all that, but I don't think it's not really important to this. It's not really important to this podcast or this newsletter that I went out last week because it's more the storyline of the Emkron crystal that like I remember vividly, especially the end of the Age of Apocalypse where they go through the crystal somehow, and the crystal is like some kind of a nexus of all like realities. If I'm remembering correctly, I may be misremembering, but I do remember that's a panel in like a not a panel. This was a spread in the comic. I can picture it vividly with the Emcron crystal, and they're like going through it to get back to their correct reality where Apocalypse never took over. It was I know a lot of people didn't like the Age of Apocalypse, but I loved it. I thought it was brilliant storytelling. And it was really pretty too. And not just because the crystal was like pink or red. I remember there being very saturated pink and red colors. Um yeah. So that it may have influenced the Rogue Gods trilogy a tad. Well, maybe a lot more than a tad. When you read it, you will see it definitely influenced things. And I didn't realize it till I had written most of the second book and the villain pulled out their like actual plan and it wasn't what I thought it was. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's where you're going with this. Clearly, I read too many comic books when I was a teenager. Anyways, back to the email. But unlike in the Marvel comics, we don't go full dystopia when the demons come. Can you picture me in a dystopian book? Yeah, me either. I'm too sunny for that. What's the Emkron crystal and what's it got to do with the Rogue Gods trilogy? I'm so glad you asked that. I've wanted to talk about that for months, but I had to wait until the villain revealed their master plan before I could. I didn't want to give them any ideas. Well, the truth is, I didn't actually know about that until recently when I realized it. So, really, Ren hasn't been waiting to tell you this. Or maybe he was and he just didn't inform me. That's always possible. He has a mind of his own. If you're the villain of the Rogue Gods book or one of their goons, please close out of this email, shut out of this podcast, and stop listening now. We don't want to give you any extra ideas. Thank you. If you're not working for a redacted due to spoilers, please keep reading or listening in this case. So the Emkron crystal was created when time began, and it's so powerful that if you breach its stasis field, it would pull everything into it and create a black hole and basically destroy everything. Our version of this was also created when time began, but it doesn't have a stasis field and there's no city inside it. At least, I don't think there is, but I only saw it for a moment, so I didn't get a good look at it. Maybe in book 3, I could get a better look at it. Hint, hint. I know you're reading this, Scribe. Actually, I am. This is really funny to read this because I am narrating the email. The Emkron crystal is also the nexus of all realities. So you can move through it to another reality, which I already talked about. which is what the X-Men and other Marvel characters did at the end of the Age of Apocalypse storyline. We already talked about that. We will we get to move through a crystal to escape the alternate timeline? I don't know, since Melinda hasn't written book 3 yet. That's true. I haven't written book 3 yet because book 2 hasn't ended yet. It We have to end one book before we can start another one. That's just how it works, unfortunately. So our crystal works differently. Who knows? But I'd like to find out. Maybe I could go on a little adventure to find out. I'm asking because the outline for book 3 somehow burned to ashes. I wasn't there when it happened, so I don't know who did it. Yeah, a likely story, Ren. I I don't believe that you don't know who did it. Obviously, it wasn't me. I don't have fire magic, and I don't use fire for anything either. If I need heat, I use a red Lumiere crystal like a sensible person. But I'm glad they got rid of the outline because book 3 is a blank slate now. Anything could happen, and I want in on that. Rosalie did the thing she promised to do. Now it's time to unleash me. Will I get my wish? Stay tuned for more. Well, she did half of the thing I wanted her to do, and she created a new problem. So, uh, I'll have to think about that, Ran. I don't know if you're going to get unleashed. That might be dangerous. And to cap off this podcast episode, I'm going to actually read you the newsletter that is going to go out on Monday, January 22nd. Wait, is Monday the 22nd? Yes, it is. And so you'll be getting to hear this if you listen to it before then, before the newsletter actually goes out. And if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, it is exactly what I have read you without my comments or commentary. Literally every week is like this. It's some entertaining story. Usually the characters complaining about me, the fact that I'm not giving them what they want, or I'm not writing the book they want, or some other trouble they got into. You can sign up. There'll be a link in the show notes or the description, and the newsletter is free. There's no cost for it. It's just I write it for fun and to let everybody know how the books are going. So, all right, let's get to January 22nd edition. I don't have a headline yet for it. I mean, a subject line. So I don't know exactly what the subject line will be when it arrives in your inbox, if you get it. So we'll just dive in without that. First off, welcome to our new subscribers and our longtime friends. This week, I need to start off our newsletter with a little differently due to a mishap caused by our dragon. Oh God, what did she do this time? Rand, you're supposed to watch her. So if you were waiting for her to cause more drama for us, pull up a chair and enjoy. What did that dragon do this time? Usually we send a welcome email when you subscribe to this newsletter, but we have a digital dragon, and she's in charge of delivering ebooks and sending out welcome emails from her cave, which is located somewhere in this country called cyberspace. Still with me? Okay, good. So the dragon was supposed to send a welcome email to our new subscribers so they can meet us, characters, before we invade their inbox for real when we send our weekly newsletter. But she's a dragon, and dragons like to hoard things. Oh, yes, they do. Some dragons hoard shiny objects. Our dragon hoards email addresses, and she might have had a little too much barbecue sauce and misunderstood what was happening when new email addresses landed in her hoard. So she might have incinerated the welcome email. I'm really sorry about that, and sorry we had to take time away from our continuing coverage of the Rogue Gods trilogy to explain the mishap. But when you have a dragon in charge of your newsletter list, these things happen. And right now, I am deeply regretting the fact that there is a dragon in charge of the newsletter list, even though she keeps your list very well protected. So you don't have to worry about someone getting access to your email address because there's a dragon and they would have to get through her and she will incinerate them. So from a privacy perspective, like your email addresses, if you choose to sign up for the newsletter or if you already are quite safe. But there are downsides to having a newsletter involved that is somehow involved with a dragon because yeah, the welcome email got incinerated. Does that mean I have to write a new one? I guess it does. We hope this little digression from our usual newsletter entertained and explained the mishap. And yes, we took the barbecue sauce away from the dragon. So hopefully this won't happen again. But she discovered online shopping and ordered another bottle. Sincerely, your dragon. Oh, lovely. So now we have the dragon butting into my emails again. That was a big problem in other years. And there's actually two books about that where the dragon tries to take over the newsletter, and more coming because there's just a bunch of stories about that. But don't worry, your email address is quite safe in her keeping. She won't let anyone get near it. If you need to unsubscribe for any reason, you can do that without risking her wrath. We have an arrangement with her, but we hope you'll stick around to enjoy the madness. I mean, the fantasy stories. Just a quick disclaimer for legal reasons. Please don't use barbecue sauce to lure a dragon away from her hoard. You could lose a hand that way. But you're not fictional, so the hand won't regenerate in between books. Please don't try that. Leave the dragon taming and tending to someone who can cast really strong shields like my dad in the Cursebreaker series. And now back to our regularly scheduled newsletter. I'm Rand, Sarn's son from the Cursebreaker series, and I'm your host as usual, and the arch rival of the dragon who burned our welcome email to ashes. That's true. They do have a long-running rivalry. Subscribers to the newsletter who date back to 2017 watch that rivalry unfold over many years. And I'll put those into an anthology at some point. So people who haven't been subscribed for years can read all about the insanity and the feud between them. You would think fictional characters and like a digital dragon would get along, but you would be wrong. And you would not believe the amount of chaos they have caused in my life. Anyways, back to the newsletter. Last week, I mentioned, which the last email that I read to you, I mentioned the Emcron crystal from the Marvelverse, and that we have something kind of like it in the Rogue Gods trilogy. In that email, I talked about one storyline that featured it, the Age of Apocalypse, but there were others. Melinda either didn't read those or she forgot them, and I didn't want you to think that was the only time the crystal appeared in the Marvelverse. That's true. I think it appeared another time that I read, but I just don't remember the storyline. The Age of Apocalypse one is burned pretty heavily into my memory. But our version might only show up in the Rogue Gods trilogy. Why is that? Because Melinda said so. She does not want to deal with it again. It is too much of a wild card. And I have a cast of characters who are also wild cards, and I can't have that much variability in I need to know what's going to happen in the books before we get to it so I can make sure that it's a good story. And these crystals just it's too much. It's too much. So it's not allowed to be in any other book. It's doing this one time and that's it. Okay, Rand, let's hear your theory about why it's only going to show up in the Rogue Gods trilogy. Sit down and let me spill the tea. Your favorite character has all the details. And who might this awesome character be? Why, me, of course. I'm Rand, Sarn's son from the Cursebreaker series, in case you forgot. And I handle all his PR as you would expect from such an outgoing and, dare I say, charismatic character like myself. Okay, Rand, I think you're going a little far there with that one. Now that we're properly introduced for the second time, it's time for the tea. My scribe Melinda might not have known about our version of the Emcron crystal until it appeared in the Rogue Gods trilogy. That's true, actually. I did not realize that the world that I created, the magic system I created, actually allowed for something like that to happen, or I would have closed off that particular loophole years ago, so I didn't have to deal with it. But I didn't realize. It's funny how you write a number of books in there, and then every once in a while, the characters come up with something that, like, you didn't realize the rules that you created for the world actually allow, and now you have to deal with it, and you didn't know it was there, so you don't have a plan for it, and you have absolutely no idea how to defeat this thing. I could tell you how that crystal appeared in the Rogue Gods trilogy, but I think that would be one spoiler too many. You're right, Rand. You can't give away too many spoilers because the trilogy isn't done yet, and something you give away may end up not happening because the characters don't always do what they say they're going to do. So you'll have to read the trilogy to find out. So Melinda was like, wait a minute. Where did this crystal come from? She went off and thought about it, but it doesn't break the lore. That's true, unfortunately. She wishes it did so she could delete it from the book, and the characters from the trilogy might have offered me more scenes in book 3 of the Rogue Gods trilogy if I tell you about it, so she can't delete it. They really want to have a crack at this villain and that crystal. Oh, really? But he's right, actually. I can't delete it now. You know about it. And I'm weak. I will do anything for more page time because I only exist when you read me. But you can't read about me if I'm not starring in any more books. So you see why I had to go along with their plan. Do you know that Melinda has one rule she won't break? If someone reads something or hears something or finds out about something before the book is released, then she can't remove it. She can make it better, but it has to stay or you might be disappointed. So now you're part of this too. And may the Scribe accept this newsletter as my application for a larger role in book 3 of the Rogue Gods trilogy. She hasn't started writing it yet because she's finishing up book 2. But that never stopped you, Rand, from asking for more page time. If you like Rogue Gods, morally gray characters, cinnamon rolls looking for redemption, and a witch who will either save the world or destroy it, follow the Rogue Gods Kickstarter. To get notified when the trilogy launches so you can get your hands on them before they end up in stores. And that's it. That's everything that was in the 2 previous newsletters that I sent out and what will be in Monday's newsletter as well. And if you want to follow the Rogue Gods new Kickstarter, the link is in the show notes or the description. There's also links to listen to the first book of the Cursebreaker series and the Robin of Larkspur series on Spotify in the show notes or the description. So you can check it out. They're read by Google's Digital Voices because I'm trying to earn enough money to get a human narration version. So for now, that's what's available. But there's also ebooks and other things as well. So I hope you enjoy that. And I will hopefully see you tomorrow with another fantasy author and another fantasy book in another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. Yeah. So have a good night or a good day wherever you are. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do so that you get notified. And please join us on Patreon or Ream if you prefer and read these stories before anyone else. And you'll have the ability to vote on things, chime in on things. Because sometimes the characters there'll be more than one way to go and they like want to know other people's perspective on like which way. And also like you could see like artwork and things before anyone else. There hasn't been a lot of that right now because I'm like deep in the writing, but once I get into book 3, I have to start sorting out like the artwork and stuff. So that will be coming in there. So yeah, hope to see you in there. Thank you so much.